Hello and welcome to The Gist. I'm your host, Chris Vetrano, here every week breaking down all the things in pop culture and interviewing the people that make it pop. Today, I have a great guest. He fronts an incredible pop punk band whose hit singles have scored multi-platinum selling status, and their first 4 albums have soared up to the top of the Billboard charts. Their incredible live show has graced stages all over the world, and their new single, Favorite Daze, is already generating tons of buzz as they prepare to hit the road again. Please welcome to The Gist, Neon Trees frontman Tyler Glenn. Hey, Tyler.
Hey, Chris, that was an intro for the Daze. That's great.
Yeah, well, you guys have been doing it, and it's great to see you again. It's been a
It's good to see
while.
you. Yeah, it's been a long time. You're from an earlier era.
Yeah, I think 13 years.
Oh yeah.
I think last time I saw you, you were in Nashville opening for Maroon 5. We went to dinner at Rolf and Daughters. But even then, it's been a long time since then.
Yeah, so because that was like 2012, 2013.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, and I'll tell the listeners, but I want you to kind of give us some of the backstory, because I was first introduced to Neon Trees in 2010 at South by Southwest. I think upstairs at some venue. I can't remember. You and I met afterwards. You handed
Was it
me
that Entertainment Weekly party?
Yes. Yeah, it was like the
Yeah,
Entertainment Weekly, like artist to watch or something. Yeah, and you handed me the kind of like sampler or the like 3-song EP, and
Totally.
I was like, oh, these guys are going to be amazing. And you were shortly after your single "Animal" was everywhere, went double platinum. Habits, incredible debut album. I actually was just earlier today listening to "In the Next Room," which is a song that I spin all the time.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it's a great song. But tell folks here like a little bit about how you got to that point and how did the band sort of come together?
You know, I mean, it was like, well, it was those days, obviously. And now we're gonna date ourselves, but who cares? I'm happy to be the age I am. 2005 was like a different day for sure.
Yeah.
That's when we first sort of joined forces as a band. Half my band was playing in different bands. It was very much that like early, like start a band, get in a practice space and write songs together era. And like when we decided we want to play shows, like booking it ourselves, very MySpace and Pure Volume and early Facebook days. And we just were the type to like, let's play in front of anybody and everybody, no shame. We played apartment buildings. We played like a juicery where in the middle of our performance, like there'd be blenders, like coffee shops. It was kind of just this, we'll do whatever. And we were in random Provo, Utah, which no one thinks of as a place for music or entertainment, right? Like,
Yeah.
But we all sort of met there. I was raised Mormon. Most of my band was raised Mormon. So there was that connection there that brought us to Utah. But I wasn't there to do Mormon things. I was there to, start a band and then go back to LA, which was sort of what I was brought up on, is like, that's where the music industry is. That's where you'll network. And we sort of tried to do that, like move to LA, although we didn't really move to LA. We just moved back home to Temecula, but we told everyone we were moving to LA, and we would drive up there every week and like play a show or try to meet somebody to come watch us or do a networking thing. And we hustled and we grinded, and we didn't have the tools that people have now, which for better, for worse. I think, some of it brought us a lot of our integrity and a lot of like our hustle, which I think was really important. But we eventually got signed out of Utah. We had an A&R come to a show like an hour north of Salt Lake at this tiny little place, and they had seen us open for the Killers twice. We did like, I think the legend that, at least our legend, was that we like toured with them, but we really only did like 2 West Coast shows. Yeah. On their Day and Age tour. And that's all it took, just getting in front of the right audiences and building kind of a core audience here. And Yeah, we got signed. I think we also just thought we like we would make a record and then go on tour, and then we would like make another record, because our favorite bands were those types of bands that like, built something. And I feel like we did, but we had no concept of like our first song at radio would like blow us into the stratosphere.
Yeah.
And it was a weird life to lead like instantly. And the naivete of our band was really pure, because we were like, oh, this is just life now. Like, we rub
Mhm.
shoulders with celebrities, we're playing talk shows. Oh, now we're opening for all these big bands.
Yeah.
And it was a rush and a ride for probably 5 solid years of like touring, releasing records, and my life caught up with me, and the rest is sort of my history. But it was like it it is still amazing. I don't like to talk about it like it's not a thing still, but it was such a rush. That first sort of blast was
Yeah,
crazy.
I mean, you were in the industry where I feel, because I was in the industry as well on the business
Yeah.
side, and it was, in my opinion, more fun back then because
Huh?
artists were hustling, and the ones that had it, like had the it factor, they
Yeah.
did sort of like have the opportunity to be blown into the stratosphere. And I feel like now it's like so different. The formula is so different. It's like
Yes.
about how many views you get on TikTok, or if your sound gets like charting on the
It's high
TikTok.
school. It's a popularity contest, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
It's wild how much it has changed. And I think, you mentioned like the Killers, and you mentioned some of these other bands that you felt like they were recording records and going out and touring because that was what you did, and that was what you were
Yeah.
supposed to do, and that's how you got the listeners, was being on the road. And so for you guys too, you guys have such a dynamic live performance, and
Thank
you're
you.
such a dynamic live performer. I remember like early on, I used to be like, it's like David Bowie and like Gwen Stefani together, like that's Tyler.
Oh,
And
hell yeah. Thank you. I mean, those are my maybe throw Karen O and Freddie in the
yeah.
mix, but those are like my like highlight banner
Yeah.
inspiration. So
Yeah, and it comes across, and I think that was like, and that's what I feel like now. Even I mean, this is obviously, you guys aren't in this kind of like pop space that like come from boy bands and stuff, but I have this conversation a lot about how like in the day, like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys, like they have like massive pop hits, but they were also like working their asses off, like learning dance routines and
oh,
choreo.
I know, we've learned about that in retrospect, like how much they really didn't see their slice of the pie, and
Yeah.
were like truly hustling. Yeah.
But now it's like even the like boy bands and stuff, they don't have to dance anymore, and they don't have to like work as
Hmm.
hard, and they like, they come up in different ways, and they have the same sort of massive success, and probably still aren't seeing a ton of the slice of the pie. But
Yeah.
it's just so much has changed since then. And and you mentioned, the first album you guys, or the first single, sort of like got you guys there. But when most bands really struggle, especially as they call it, like the sophomore slump, you guys come out of the gates with a 5-time platinum Everybody Talks single
Hmm.
to lead Picture Show, which in my like is probably one of my favorites. I mean, I am definitely a Neon
Thank
Trees
you.
fan, but Picture Show, I mean, I could listen to it all the time because it's like it's the soundtrack of my John Hughes movie life that I
Yeah.
feel.
Oh my
And
god.
I, I love it. And, and so many artists like struggle to kind of make that leap. And you guys did that like so effortlessly. And it just kind of continued for you so that you can kind of continue on that
What's
journey.
so funny about or interesting about that is I truly thought of Everybody Talks was just going to be a nice bridge song, because it felt like it came from a similar palette, like an Animal or Habits era, but it
Hmm.
it felt like a continuation of that. But then, you mentioned Picture Show, which I feel was sort of like our really stretching our wings and try to be a little bit more like artistic and like really make a record. And it was also like there's a beautiful thing about, if you have some success, your label is going to be more interested in giving you a little bit more of a budget and a little bit more time to make a record, and choose who you want to make it with. And so we got to really have that record making experience. Like, I lived in the W in Hollywood for 2 months, and we
Hmm.
we recorded at Ocean Way. It was just, and it felt I'd already had this image in my mind. Like I wanted to make it about um, a little bit of old Hollywood and new Hollywood, how that city can eat you alive. And
Mm-hmm.
there's that element I wanted to thread through. And the imagery really came together just because every time I was walking the studio, there was the Hollywood sign. There was the energy of that time in LA. And it was new to me. Like it was always, LA was always my backyard growing up in Temecula. Like I knew of LA. We would go there to see shows. We would go on little trips there. But to get to really know it in a way that was different and being creative there was really special. But I had no concept of Picture Show or of Everybody Talks being like the song that was gonna like continue it. I was so pure in my mind of just like, oh, we're gonna make this really like interesting, arty, new wave, introspective record, and I'm gonna sneak weird queer things in it, and I'm gonna like highlight artists I love, and I didn't realize that Everybody Talks would be the thing that sort of encapsulated the whole thing, but it got us, it only propelled us, right? Like, and I love that song. I just didn't think of it in the way that I thought of some of the other songs, and that's an age old thing, right? Like you have your favorites as an artist, but I'm grateful for that motherfucker because it like continued our thing, It was really cool.
Of course. And, you mentioned like you snuck in some like queer things in there as well. And that's obviously like when you first came out as a band, you were not out as a
I wasn't.
performer, and the time was different. It wasn't as accepted, but you did sort of have that. And it's probably part of why I like resonated with so many of the lyrics. I was in the same boat, I was in the same closet. And so, it was like, I probably was like really drawn to some of the lyrics because you were sneaking that in, but it was still feeling like cool, and it was like still punk, and it was like, oh, we're gonna go and like jump around and at the Fillmore or whatever and watch neon trees, and
Totally.
and it didn't feel like oh, I was being chastised for the type of music that I liked or things like that, which I think was
cool.
like very cool. And then obviously the other two albums are incredible, and you continued on with the success. But one of the things that I notice in all of the records that you have is there does seem to be kind of like a thematic element to them. And I don't know if that's intentional or if that's just like, is that something that when you go in, like Picture Show, like I mentioned, like the John Hughes, it has definitely like 80s feels and vibes, and you've kind of always threaded that needle, but is that something that you do really intentionally when you start a project?
I do. I know. I mean, that's one thing I love about the popularity of Taylor Swift and like her adopting of like eras. Like, I know, and it's very like hot right now, and it's very associated with her. But I always thought of each album being its own era because the artists that I loved did that. Even down to obviously like Madonna being the pop artist that she was, and is. But it was always like, it always said to me like, oh, you have a new look now, and you have a new theme. There's the colors are maybe brighter. And it always started with a title. I remember thinking of, I think it was like Pop Psychology came pretty early to me. We were on tour, and I think I was going to call it like phraseology or somethingology. And then I was like, oh, Pop Psychology. And at that time, we were doing something that now isn't relevant or matter, but like at the time, us being an alternative rock band, right? Like with 4 members that played their instruments, we were always very like in interviews saying we were a pop band, and we weren't afraid of that moniker. And I always think of Lady Gaga when she first came out and said like pop will never be lowbrow, and like this kind of energy to like break away from the early 2000s and mid 2000s where it was so kind of misogynistic, and always so like there were so many rules placed, especially on bands, that you had to be a certain way, you had to look a certain way, you had to talk about certain things. And I just didn't believe that. And I, as much as like was a fan of alt music my whole life and always found like more of an identifier in those, like I was an absolute pop fan, and I didn't ever see it as like a weird thing.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't matter. Like, right. Like pop is the main force of everything in a good way. I love pop music, and it's always been to me the most powerful kind of music because it can reach more people, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
can really hide a lot in them. But for me, like pop psychology was a way to play on the idea that we are a pop band, and also like it's also talking about my inner life and my struggle that I was going through, and I sort of hiding that. And it is, I guess, my coming out record, even though I feel like I came out more on my solo thing, my solo record,
Yeah.
but it was like the timing came out like where I came out in Rolling Stone and I did the whole like public coming out, and so I guess that's associated with that record.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember going back to Picture Show, which I remember this, but I guess I didn't really acknowledge it until recently again, that I, in that song Teenage Sounds, I say the line, I'm sick of being called a fag because I'm queer.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't even out till 2 years later. I wasn't even uttering the word. Like, so I was always, I think I was always hidden in plain view in ways, but
Yeah.
maybe I didn't know it, or maybe didn't have the confidence to
Yeah.
do it yet. But it is nice to look back and go, I was always at least honest as I could be at that moment,
Yeah.
which I hopefully resonates with people that at least listen. You know.
Yeah, I mean, and like we've said, it was a different time. It just
Mhm.
wasn't as like widely accepted. It you also, I mean, I don't know, maybe you did in interviews like have to deny that question, or I don't
Oh,
even
I
know if you were
did.
ever.
Yeah, I had
Oh,
to
you
deny. I
did.
remember being asked specifically about that line during like promoting Picture Show, and I think I was honest about my answer too. It was just like I always thought of, queer's been reclaimed in a way that I think is really cool and powerful and sort of
Yeah.
like an umbrella term, but even back then, which is not that long ago, but like 10-ish years ago, 11-ish years ago, it's like queer to me meant weird, or queer to me meant other. And so I was using that word in a way, and I had been called a fag since I was, 4
Yeah.
years old.
Yeah.
So I
Same.
was I was being honest, but I, you know, I think you more than anyone knows what it feels like to be in the closet and be afraid. And
Yeah.
I didn't come out till I was 30, so I had a lot
Same.
of wiring to undo.
Yeah. And I guess I didn't know that I came out at 30 as well. That's
Oh, I mean, look at
yeah,
our timelines.
the parallels. Yeah, and it was, and I obviously remember that line, and it being like something. And I remember, I can't remember where you guys played, the Ogden or something in Denver, and I went to see you, and I saw you after the show, and you had like I can't remember her name. We became like friends on social media, but she was like one of your best friends, and she
Was
was
it
like
Kate or was it Ashley?
Kate.
Kate,
Yeah.
yeah, Kate.
Yeah.
Still my best friend.
Oh, awesome. That's so good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kate was there, and we were like talking about how like which one of you was Paris and which one of you was Nicole.
Very
And I was like,
simple life. Hi.
okay, I was like Tyler's family, and like I
Yeah,
knew at
yeah.
the time, but I was like also not like telling anyone, and so it did feel like just like, oh, okay, I can really like dive into this band and like feel like I
Do
have
you
somebody.
did you have? I mean, us being so similar in many ways, at least with the path of our like identity. Like, did you have that thought like it was no one's business to come out? Because I sure did. Like, I definitely adopted and even believed that, which I don't feel is the case, or is the truth. But I always felt like really subscribed to the idea of like it's no one's business, or it's my little secret, or I even like found it fun to be. It could added mystery to me, which is not a healthy thing, right? At all. Like I've only realized since, like it's only healthy to be authentic, and it's not a sustainable life to keep it quiet. But I don't know. I sort of believed that for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I moved to Nashville to be more ingrained in the music industry and
Yeah.
join like the music business. And I felt like here I could be the bigger fish in the smaller pond than going to LA. And but the difference was like I moved here and everyone was like, it's a good old boys town, it's a good old boys town. And
Yeah.
and obviously, like I'm sure you see all of our wonderful news that comes out of Tennessee in the politics space. So it's
No.
like
Yeah. Not
this
great.
doesn't feel like a safe place. And so I don't know if it ever like felt fun, or like this fun secret I had, because I felt unsafe about the secret
Mm.
that I was carrying. but it wasn't until I met who's now one of my best friends, Cassidy Pope. She had come off of The Voice, and
Yeah, I know Cassie from Hey Monday and
yeah,
all that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and now she's back in pop punk. I
Which is great. I think I heard that People That I Love Leave. That's a cool song. It
Yeah,
sounds right for her.
yeah, she's got one coming out uh, actually tomorrow um,
Nice.
that you'll have to check out. It's very sexy. It's called Almost There.
Cool.
And but yeah, we were at having drinks one night, and she just like started asking me like, so like, have you like how long have you been single? Like, when was the last time you had a boyfriend? Like, I don't know. She just started like asking me, and it was like the first time that I was like, I feel safe with this person, and I just like was like,
She was just
oh
being assumptive, right? Like just
yeah.
saying, "Oh, cool, nice."
And I just kind of like went with it. And then she kind of like could sense it. And she was like, did I just like ask you something that I shouldn't have? And I was like, no, actually, like that feels right. And so
Oh,
we
awesome.
just like started, and that just kind of like rippled effect. And then I met my now husband, but uh, I just changed my status one day to on Facebook to like engaged or or in a relationship or something, and all of a sudden I got like texts from family members and they were like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know that you came out. And I was like, I didn't. I mean, they just did, I guess, but I
Yeah.
just changed my relationship status and now you guys know. And so it did feel like a little bit like I didn't have to, because at that point too, I was like I said, like I was 30 years old.
Hmm.
I didn't feel like I needed to like have some kind of like explanation or some big like coming out party, because I was an adult and I was just doing what felt right to me in that moment. And so,
It's
and I know,
interesting. I felt this obligation. Like once I decided to come out in my private life and like slowly tell people that I felt close to and safe to, um, then I started feeling obligation. I remember just like calling each important person in my life and like either having, can we go to dinner or can I talk to you for a couple hours? And I don't know if that is like right. I mean, it was right for me. I also really acknowledge it essentially is no one's business, or like it's the business is when you want it to make it a thing.
right.
But I do like to echo like that. I mean, I remember seeing like Milk, the movie, and Harvey Milk was a big inspiration
Mhm.
in those early days for me, because it was like his his want and desire for everyone to come out for visibility. And I can just be someone that can say, honestly, my life has improved. At least my mental health has improved since I've come out. But it's not this magic thing, right? Like you don't all of a sudden like know every drag queen on
Yeah.
Drag Race. You don't know
Yeah.
every law being implemented in every
Right.
state. Like you're not this perfect
Yeah.
gay person all of a
Yeah.
sudden, right?
Yeah.
And, that
You're
was a
just a
lesson to me too.
person.
I had to shut up. Like I had to go like, I actually need to learn a little. I'm not
Yeah.
just, you know,
Yeah.
this king all of a sudden.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think the interesting kind of thread that I'd love to hear your perspective on in that too is like you came out, but you also mentioned the band very Mormon.
Yep.
It was a bit of the brand in the beginning too, and I feel like that
Mm.
that label got on you guys a little bit just because you kept saying that you were out of Utah, and I feel like everyone was like, oh well, Utah like Mormon, and that became like kind of the story of Neon Trees. But I
Yeah.
know that the band has taken quite a turn in
Yes.
since then. And like, how was your coming out, and was that responsible in any kind of way for kind of some of the changes that the band has had personally?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, coming out was, once I got over the hurdle of it and felt and realized that it was being received mostly with love. And I think that was the troubling thing for me is you're right. I came out as Mormon still, and like this naivety that I had where I was like, I'd spent so much time never fitting into my religion, but always carrying so much water for it.
Hmm.
And you're right, like in interviews early on, I felt it like kind of like punk or defiant to be like, yeah, I look like this, and yeah, I perform like that, and yeah, I sing like this way, but I'm also Mormon. What's your
Yeah.
problem?
Yeah.
And there was sort of that attitude to not shy away from it, but it's true, it did become a label, and I think we adopted it because it felt kind of defiant. But I realized after coming out And, it came out as, I think the article was called "Gay Mormon and Finally Out" in Rolling Stone. Like
Mm-hmm.
that moniker was always attached to me, and part of coming out for me was trying to like get rid of all of the labels and all of the ceiling that I had lived in the box, and yet I feel like about the year or two after, I almost felt more closed in. The Pop Psychology tour was amazing. It was the first time I was performing as an out person, and it was very inspirational. And there were moments in the show that I would really authentically cry and just feel like so grateful that people were still coming and still interested. And it was really
Supporting.
powerful for me.
Yeah.
But I think
Amazing.
after, and then things happen within the faith, the Mormon church, that only proved to feel like it was going to be even more stifling to remain in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it really came down, the gut punch came down when they sort of made a new policy that if you were a parent of a queer person, your kids would have to disavow you to be baptized, and like
Mm-hmm.
that kind of language. And then realizing we were still being coupled in, like, Mormonism loves to classify sin or like give certain merit to sin, which is absurd, right? But
Right.
being gay was in the same classification as incest or murder, and it's like, or pedophilia, and it's like, and
Mm-hmm.
you really just let it go. I'm supposed to be happy and I'm finally living my truth, and yet I'm carrying all this water and all this devotion to this faith that's never had space for me, never had room. And that was the real point when I let it just like, I looked at everything and I was like, this is, and if I'm offensive, I'm sorry, but like, this is made up. This is made up, and it's actually limiting my life, and it's actually doing harm. Like if I thought the closet was doing harm, like
Mm-hmm.
this is the thing that's really going to keep me from fully flourishing. And I did what a lot of people think is scary. I just burnt it down. I burnt the bridge happily, and it really altered my band in a lot of ways, and it was really painful for
Yeah.
a long time, because I didn't ask permission from my bandmates. I wasn't really communicative. I was doing my solo thing, and I felt safe to do it. It was under my name,
Mm-hmm.
and I was doing it while I was processing it and while I was in the heat of the faith crisis and sort of out in orbit, feeling like I was, spinning. So
So
it
how did
was
you
it was
heal
hard.
that? How did you like heal that relationship? And, because obviously like I know Elaine, I know that some of the band members have been outspoken too about some of the
Yeah,
things that you have said. And, but they've also changed a lot, and they,
they have.
have their own brands now of different kind of, the way that they wear their faith is different. And,
Yeah,
uh, how did you guys heal to come back and now obviously continue on?
I mean, we healed. We we did a lot of group therapy, or I mean, maybe not in a structured way, but there was a lot of like conversation for the first time, and really getting deep into it. And I think me leaving Mormonism and coming out, I had this craving to have conversations finally that weren't. I don't know if you've ever talked to someone, and I know I'm going to come across as some anti-religious, like crazy person, but those are my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But you ever talk to someone that sort of has limitations,
Oh yeah.
whether they're religious or moral or political, and they can only talk about so many things, or it can only go so far.
Mm-hmm.
And once I shed a lot of that, I had this real craving to just like really get to know people, really realize like, oh, I have way more thoughts on that than I ever shared. And so in that way, I was not afraid to have conversations with my band, and really, I wanted to know where they stood. I wanted to know where they thought about certain things. And I wanted to challenge them for the first time and not just pacify that so it wasn't uncomfortable,
Right.
So we've had to break down a lot. And yeah, I mean, Elaine's been through her own journey. I don't like speaking for her, but she's in an incredible place.
Yeah.
And I hope she's able to talk more free about where she's at in her life as well. I think, you know, we're all really respectful of where we're at now, and there wasn't that for a few years, you know. We have like a real love. I think we're all kind of in love with each other again.
That's awesome.
And I don't say that lightly. And that's healing for me because I'm getting to know Elaine, and I'm getting to know Chris in ways I didn't know before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard and kind of wild to say after being in a family for 15 years, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm actually more excited to see them than it's only getting more exciting, and there's more value there than maybe I thought.
Yeah.
So.
And I think I mean, as someone who obviously, we grounded the conversation at the beginning with, I've been around, I know the music, I know the catalog, for the last 13 plus years. And, you know, I think in Favorite Days, you can hear it again. You can
Cool.
hear that you guys are gelling, that you guys are back. It feels like, you know, this is the continuation of what you guys were doing. And so I think it's really exciting. Is there, we were talking about themes of music. Is there a theme, or is there something that's really drawing inspiration for this project that Favorite Days is sort of kicking off?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to give away the title because, like, these days you try to reserve each piece of information to get some sort of hit or something. But I will say that it is an album. There's 12 songs on it. This is the start, but you know, we're not doing that start stop thing where we like throw it at the wall and see if it sticks. Like, there's a real deliberate thread and plan here, and I think choosing Favorite Days as the start, it felt just, I think the whole record has an urgency, and I think you can kind of hear the seams more on this record than in records past. I think we'll always use the studio and synths and production elements because that's record making, right? And I love those elements, but I think you can really feel the band. Like, you can really feel Elaine's musicality as a drummer on this record. There was a real deliberate thought to bring what we bring live into the record, and I think we've done that on occasion on songs. I'm not saying like any of our records are flat. I think they all have an energy, but there's a bit more of a feeling there of that. But it's still a Neon Trees record, and I'm happy as a lyricist on this album more than ever. I think because going back to like sometimes not feeling safe to be completely myself, and sometimes even in the band, I don't feel that anymore when I'm a writer. I'm not worried if I choose to say a swear word, or if I choose to say a line like "justify my love" or "get the fuck off my dick," that Elaine's gonna hear the demo and go, oh, okay, well, we need to change that. That's like Favorite Days was actually like one of her favorite of the demo batches when I first started showing them stuff. So it's like that, as a creator and a kind of the leader of the band, it gives me a lot of like a sigh of relief, and then lets me just be myself. I mean, it was funny. Elaine is also a backup, does a lot of backups and harmonies in our band, and that's a sound of a lot of the songs. And she did a backup on a lot of those like kind of colorful lines and phrases. Yeah. So usually she'd be mortified, but she was like happily doing it. So
yeah. I love when she comes out and does her on Pop Psychology, when she's got her like little solo and she comes out.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
I love it. So the album though won't be out until 2024, right? The beginning of 2024.
Yeah, it'll be, I think we're aiming at March. But
okay. So are we going to get more music before then? Because the tour kicks off in San Francisco September 15th, I think.
Yep.
And so are you going to give us more of samplings of what we're going to get on the new album, or is this going to be kind of your era?
I think we'll have 2 more songs.
Okay.
At least before the end of the year.
Nice.
And Favorite Days isn't necessarily like we're pushing it. It is at alt radio and it's getting ads, and that's exciting. But it was more like the song paired with that visual. That was the deliberate nature of it. We wanted to have that be the tone setter.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, I think that song has, you know, mass appeal qualities, but I'm not necessarily so focused on it being like charting or it needing to
Right.
like reach some peak. And if it does, that's amazing. And we're not just throwing it out to get streams or something, but I think there's other songs that we're very focused on being more like of a banner anthem of the record.
Nice.
But I'm happy, and I've really felt, you know, the only thing that's frustrating about releasing modern music these days, which I'm sure you can completely understand, is we're so slave to an algorithm we don't understand anymore.
Yeah.
And we're I don't know, we're all just forced to become content creators.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't get in this business to do that. And so what I love is seeing fans comment and hearing authentic like reactions that are all positive and excited. And the frustrating part is like, I know that if we somehow paid a certain dollar or found some goosing of an algorithm that we could cut through it.
Yeah.
So it's that weird thing of like, how do you reach an audience these days, right?
Yeah, it's tough and it's very different than it used to be. But
Yeah,
you know, you guys always have been the hustlers and able to do it.
yeah,
And so, you know, I feel confident that you will find it again.
I appreciate it. I mean, we've always been a slow burn, which I kind of find value, and I don't like to just I never think about things like putting it out so that it reaches some status. I don't think that way still, but it is a nice quality to have,
Of course.
to reach, you know. So
yeah, validating even if you're not searching for validation
that's
in
it.
what you're doing. So tell us a little bit about what we can expect from the tour, because obviously now you've got such a huge catalog. I imagine it's really tough to put a set list together with so many great songs. So what can folks sort of expect?
Yeah, it's called the Favorite Days Tour, for obvious reasons, because it's the new song and it's sort of, you know, the demarcation of a new chapter. But I also like calling it that because it has a nostalgia quality, and I think that's not, you know, the show is not a nostalgia play, but it's definitely, we're being deliberate in the size venues we're playing. We're not coming out of a pandemic right away trying to like sell out huge rooms,
Mm-hmm.
and we haven't toured in a while. And I think the best place to start is a place of really playing for the core. Mm-hmm. So I think the it's going to be very catered to like our fans that know albums, that know songs beyond the 3 or 4 songs that the mass appeal knows, you know. I think and we didn't get to tour off of I Can Feel You Forgetting Me because we put it out during the pandemic. So it's going to be fun to have that as a section in the show. We're building it right now. We're changing the stage plot for the first time in years. We're, you know, adding actual like production element. It's really fun. Like, this is our first hard ticket public facing thing in a quite a minute. So I'm geeking out in that way, you know.
Yeah, no, I wish you guys were coming to Nashville. I might have to.
It's dumb we're not. I know.
I know.
After we put, like, we're reaching all of the like the major cities, but Nashville's a major city. But when we put it out, I was like, oh yeah, why aren't we playing like Boston or Pittsburgh or Nashville? Yeah. But it's, all I have to say is this isn't a one and done situation. And I know there has been sort of a push pull with our fans at times throughout the last 10, 12 years. But I'm confidently saying, unless someone decides that we're now in lockdown again or some terrible thing happens, which you never know.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping nothing is in the way for us to continue to, we have our eyes on a larger prize for sure.
Nice. Well, and Nashville's a tough city. It's a music industry town, and a lot of folks want, you know, comps to go to shows, and it's, you know, a lot of them sit around and don't like jump around and get like into it. We get a little we have low energy crowds here sometimes.
Yeah. Well, we
Um,
did Nashville Pride maybe 3 or 4 years ago, which
oh yeah, I
was
remember it.
bad, which was
Yeah.
really cool,
Yeah. I
and
think I
actually
was out of
feels
town for
special
that,
that
but
we got to do it. Were you there?
I think I was out of town because otherwise I would have been there. Um, but yeah, I do remember that. I saw that and I was bummed that I had to miss that. But yeah, it would
It
be great
was
to see you.
it was a surprising Pride because it was way more humbler than I expected. You hear Nashville now as like this thriving place of culture, and I know I have so many songwriter friends that have
Mhm.
moved out there and all that, and a lot of industry. And then you get there, and obviously you brought up the political points, but you get there and you realize how much there still is work to do, and
Oh yeah.
it's not this thriving liberal area that you think maybe it is.
Yeah. I mean, Nashville proper probably is a little bit more,
Is the
but
dot.
yeah, but it's the wider population of Tennessee that makes it
Sure.
tough for all of us here. But yeah, I'll pop down to Georgia or I think you guys are doing Chicago, so maybe I'll like
Go on
try
a
to
road
find
trip or
somewhere, yeah,
something. Yeah.
and come check it out because I would love to see the show again. Um, well, before we head out, where can folks sort of follow you, stay up to date with? I know obviously your socials, but then also the bands. But give us kind of the tags.
Yeah, we're official Neon Trees on all of the social platforms, even Threads.
Welcome.
These days, we gotta have it all. And
Yep.
I'm Tyler in a coma on all of it. I mostly post on Instagram. I love to share my life through stories, like we all do.
Yeah.
But and I run all the Neon Trees accounts too. Yeah,
Nice.
and our website neontrees.com for all the tour info. And we have some cool new merch that people can get to.
Grab. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Tyler, it's been so great to catch up with you. It's been so long, and I can sense an energy from you that like you feel really comfortable with who you are and where you are now, and I love to see
That
that.
means a lot because we have adjacently been walking a path for a while. So I'm glad that you are observing that. I so appreciate you always thinking of me and
Yeah.
including me. So
Yeah, when I saw the new single coming out, I was like, "Oh, great. We got to have Tyler." So we got to make
perfect.
it
Well,
happen.
let's talk again when the album comes out for sure.
Yeah, I would love to. And yeah, we've got more to talk about. I want to hear more about like your pop culture influences and all this stuff. So we got to have you
Sure.
back. Well, cool. Well, thanks again for being here. And for all of you listening, don't forget to check out Favorite Daze. It's available now. And if you like what you heard today, don't forget to rate and subscribe so that you never miss an episode of The Gist. You can find me at CM Vetrano on Instagram, Threads, Twitter, TikTok, all the things. And until next week, thanks for listening. Bye.